All right, everyone, welcome back into Cherry Picking. Today's video, weekend fantasy hockey preview for week 9 of the fantasy hockey season, presented by FanDuel Canada, North America's #1 sportsbook. An interesting slate of games this weekend for sure. Got some really great matchups, I think. One matchup I'm really looking forward to seeing are the Avalanche and the Flyers. So be sure to download that FanDuel Canada app. The link is below in the description so that you can follow along, place these bets as I go. And for those fantasy hockey juggernauts out there, I think obviously we'll be able to find some must starts, some streamers, some guys you should be maybe leaving on your bench, and so on and so forth. So let's get into today's video. All right, so the first game we have on Saturday is between the Golden Knights and the Stars. 4 p.m. start. Obviously a really solid matchup here in the Western Conference. Both of these teams playing pretty solid hockey. Stars, huge comeback win on Thursday night. Vegas, obviously, some pretty inconsistent play of hockey so far. I think the biggest surprising thing for me is to see how poorly they've played defensively. I think Adin Hill has made this team look a lot better, and even offensively as well. They cannot put the puck in the back of the net. Finally found something in St. Louis after playing a home and home against them, winning 6-3 in that one, but now focus their attention to Saturday as they play the Dallas Stars here. So looking at some starts in this one, obviously you're going to want to play the lead guys on Vegas. You want Marchessault, William Karlsson, Jack Eichel. Leads the team in points over the last 5 games played with 8. Other than that, I don't think I'd be going too far off the barrel here to be starting guys on Vegas. I think the one guy on defense that I'd obviously start in bangers leagues mainly is Braden McNabb. The guy blocks and hits everybody. He has 14 blocks over his last 5 games played and has really solidified himself in the top 15, top 20 amongst fantasy hockey defensemen because of these hits and blocks that he continues to accumulate every single night. And then on the Stars side of things, it's a little bit of a shift here. I think Matt Duchene is a great start in this one, 53% rostered. He leads the team in high danger chances for and expected goals for over the last 5 games played as well. Jamie Benn, another guy I'd be starting in this one, 79% rostered right now, so obviously won't really be on your waiver wire, but if he's on your team, I think he's definitely a start considering there's so many games in this one, or games on Saturday. And then Mason Marchment, continue to start this guy. He's been an absolute tear since the start of November pretty much. 7 points his last 5 games played, along with 17 shots on goal. And then Thomas Harley as well. If you need a defenseman, I don't hate this start. 3 goals his last 5 games played, really quiet there, just 2% rostered. So some plays I'd be looking to place at FanDuel Canada for this one would be the under, and then Matt Duchene, anytime goal scorer here, has a decent track record against Vegas when he was on Nashville, and he hasn't scored in a little bit and continues to create a ton of offense. So I'd be going with Matt Duchene to score, but the best bet in this one is the under. All right, so the next game, another 4 p.m. start Eastern time. The Devils taking on the Calgary Flames at the Saddledome. I will actually be at this game live, so excited to see that. Should be a really fun game. Probably going to see a lot of goals here. We should see Dan Vladar start for the Calgary Flames here. I wonder if the Flames are going to go back-to-back starts for Dustin Wolf now that Jacob Markstrom is out for a little bit of time here. So the 2 goalies that Ryan Huska and this Flames team will be rolling with are Vladar and Dustin Wolf. If Vladar starts, this game is definitely an over game. He's been pretty shit recently and just throughout the course of his career, like he's a backup for a reason. I think he's obviously had some good starts, but against a Devils team that's been creating the most offense since November 1st, I think this is a no-brainer over. If you look at New Jersey's numbers to start the year, 3rd in Corsi for percentage, 4th in expected goals for, top 10 in high danger scoring chances created. And I would say high danger scoring chances is not the avenue you want to look for this team because they just have so much volume in terms of shots on goal, and just like normal scoring chances don't even need to be quality because their guys are so skilled they can score on pretty much just average scoring chances. So some starts I'd have in this one. This new line of Holtz, Mercer, and Meyer has actually been pretty good. Dawson Mercer has 6 points his last 5 games played. Alexander Holtz, 4 points his last 5 games played. Lindy Ruff and this Devils team has just been begging for this Holtz breakout. And maybe this line is how he gets going here. And then looking at the defensive side of things, Luke Hughes, obviously, you're going to continue to start him. 77% roster. Pretty surprised to see him that high, but 3 goals his last 5 games played. Really starting to come into his own here in his first full season in the NHL. And then Simon Nemec just scored his first NHL goal on Thursday night against the Seattle Kraken. So that's obviously great to see. 32% rostered right now. I'd definitely be picking him up. I've talked about him in the past couple of videos, really, especially in that fantasy mailbag. If you haven't checked that out yet, definitely go check that out, answering some questions from the comments in these YouTube videos. So, and this is also technically a Tyler Toffoli revenge game here. So on the Calgary Flames side of things, I continue to start pretty much that whole line of Blake Coleman, Backlund, and then Jonathan Huberdeau. Blake Coleman, only 14% rostered, second on the team in expected goals for, scored the game winner against Carolina as well. That line continues to rock. So I continue to roll with that one. The Elias Lindholm, Nazem Kadri, like you're a little bit of streakiness there. So maybe seeing some inconsistency from those guys. So a little bit of risk if you're trying to start those guys. But like I said, I think they're going to see an explosion of goals here too, especially considering the Devils is playing a 2-1 hockey game. The Devils don't generally play in 2-1 hockey games. So I think there'll be a ton of goals here. That's why my best bet at FanDuel Canada for this one will be the over. All right, now looking a little bit later on Saturday, the Predators traveling to Toronto to take on the Toronto Maple Leafs here. The Predators have had a really great stretch, playing some really solid hockey, just kicked the shit out of the Tampa Bay Lightning. The Leafs continue to be inconsistent here. I know Joseph Woll kind of got hurt in that Ottawa game. That's not great considering the Leafs actually didn't even set Ilya Samsonov as their backup against Ottawa on Thursday night. It was Martin Jones who came in relief for Woll, ended up winning that game. The Leafs won 4-3 in that one. But just looking at these two team stats, like Toronto's analytics have not been really that great, especially defensively. I know John Klingberg's out for the season. Leafs fans are actually probably like rejoicing over that, not to obviously root for injuries, but he was so bad defensively for this team. But if you look at their expected goals against, 23rd in the NHL, this is a number I don't think we thought Toronto we would see here. I know they don't have like the greatest names on their back end and they rely on their top six a lot, but they're usually middle of the pack. So this is a little bit further down here. This Nashville team has been playing great. If you look at their offense, they're creating third in the NHL in expected goals for this season. And if you look since November 1st, I believe they're first in that category. So looking at some starts for this one, you're obviously going to continue to start Philip Forsberg, Ryan O'Reilly, and Gustav Nyquist, everyone on that top line. Colton Sissons, I think, is a really interesting option here. 6% rostered right now, leads the team in expected goals for his last 5 games played. So creating a lot of offense. Also a guy who's a little bit gritty, can get you some points in hits and block shots as well. For Toronto, you're keeping it real simple here. Usual suspects, Matthews, Marner, Tavares, Nylander, and Riley. Riley has been really regressing recently as well, which is a little disappointing to see. Was top 10 in fantasy hockey points amongst defensemen. Now he's 18th. So obviously has fallen off a little bit there. One thing I would really take a stab on at FanDuel Canada here is Matthews over 1.5 points. Didn't log a single point in that game against the Senators, had 2 goals in their previous game before that against Boston, but has a decent track record against the Nashville Predators. So I'd be looking at him for a bet at FanDuel for this one. All right, as I mentioned in the intro, this is probably going to be the game I'm most excited to watch on Saturday, and that's the Philadelphia Flyers taking on the Colorado Avalanche, 9 p.m. Eastern time. This Flyers team, I think, has surprised a lot of people this year, especially defensively, like with how young their defensive core is. They've played really well with guys like Travis Sanheim. Cam York has started to really come into his own as well. Carter Hart's playing pretty solid. And then you're seeing, obviously, the guys like Sean Couturier and Cam Atkinson come back has really had an effect on this offense, which is awesome to see because I love this Flyers team. I think John Tortorella is such an underrated coach, and continues to get like a bad rap. But with these young guys and these young hockey teams, I think he actually is such a force. So I really like the Flyers this year, and going up against a game in a Colorado team that's really struggled recently. Just 1 win over the last 5 games played. Just recently lost to the Winnipeg Jets, who I think continue to play over their skis here. But Colorado, if you look at their metrics, still really good. Pretty much top 10 in every category you want to see here. Corsi for percentage, 6th. Expected goals for, they're 9th. Expected goals against, they're 10th. And then high danger chances created per game, they're just outside the top 10 at 11, creating around 10 to 12 high danger chances per game. So another week, as I mentioned, I'm telling you to start Cam York, 3% rostered. He scored against Arizona, 4 points his last 5 games played, along with 11 shots on goal. Owen Tippett has been great this year, and I think one thing that's really surprising to see, his last 5 games played, he has 15 hits. Only Nick Delorier has more hits over that span on this Flyers team. So that's a good thing to note, considering you're going to want to continue to start, obviously, Owen Tippett because of his scoring prowess, but just know that he is contributing in other factors of the ice as well. Logan O'Connor, too, I think is a really interesting start for the Colorado Avalanche. Jared Bednar has really switched up these lines, splitting up McKinnon and Rantanen. I think he's looking for a little bit more depth. So Rantanen playing on that second line, and then Nathan McKinnon playing on a top line with Jonathan Drouin and Logan O'Connor. So that's why I think Logan O'Connor is an interesting start here. I wonder if Bednar will continue to start these lines. Those were the lines he started with against the Winnipeg Jets. But if Logan O'Connor is playing with Nathan McKinnon, I actually think this is a decent streamer. I know the Flyers are very solid defensively, but he's playing on a top line with McKinnon and Drouin. So if McKinnon scores, he's probably getting assists. And I could totally see McKinnon trying to set this kid up against the Flyers on Saturday. So some bets I'd be looking at at FanDuel for this one. The Avalanche money line 100%. I think they bounce back against a Flyers team that's won 3 straight, 2 against Pittsburgh and then Arizona. I think this will be a really tough test for the Flyers. But being on the road, or continuing to be on the road here, I think they'll struggle. And then I like the under here as well, as this Flyers team continues to play really solid defensively. I think this Colorado team hasn't shown really what we've seen in the past from them defensively. They continue to have, or still have, an unbelievable defensive unit. Even with Sam Girard out here, you have Bowen Byram, obviously Devin Taves, Cale Makar, just to name a couple of those guys. And then honestly, why not? I talked about it. Why aren't we taking Logan O'Connor as an anytime goal scorer as a Flyer here on Saturday? All right, so one of the last games on Saturday is Carolina Hurricanes taking on the Vancouver Canucks in Vancouver. They continue this Western Conference road trip. They've lost 3 in a row now, the Carolina Hurricanes. So that is honestly totally why I think the Hurricanes will be my most confident and play of the day on Saturday, taking on the Canucks. Whatever the line is, we'll probably take -1.5 as well. Carolina, 3 straight losses, but have outshot and I think honestly outplayed their opponents in all 3 of those games. Maybe not the Edmonton game, considering they went down 5-0 in the first period and Rob Brind'Amour ripped them a new one during the game, essentially said that this game is over and we're looking on to Calgary, but they just completely gave one to Calgary in that third period, allowing them to score 3 goals. So giving Dustin Wolf his first NHL win, which was obviously great to see. But Carolina Hurricanes, I think this is a team that they can dominate. The Vancouver Canucks continue to be one of the luckiest teams in the NHL. I know they had a really hot start, but I still think that they're not as good as they are. Obviously, they've been riding a really hot hand in Thatcher Demko, the Vezina top favorite for the Vezina right now. But looking at some starts in this one, I know Jesperi Kotkaniemi, and I've had a couple questions about him, and I will address it a little bit further next week in our fantasy hockey mailbag. But Jesperi Kotkaniemi, 0 points his last 5 games played, but top 3 on the team in expected goals for, alongside Seth Jarvis as well. And they're playing on that second line with Michael Bunting too. Aho has been carrying this team, really, 3 goals his last 5 games, and even scored against Calgary, but the goal got called off. That would have been the tying goal and probably would have sent that game into overtime. I think Svechnikov has been really disappointing this year. I wouldn't even mind, maybe not this game, but if you have him on your team and you are playing on a day where there's a lot of NHL games, I don't mind you sitting him here. He's like 8th on the team in expected goals for of his last 5 games played. The guy continues to miss like a game every 2 weeks. His numbers in the hit department have obviously not been that great either. So he's been really interesting for me. On the Vancouver side of things, Peterson, Besser, and Miller continue to absolutely ball out. Brock Besser continues to score goals here. So obviously you're looking at those guys, but I think a spot starter, a good streamer for this one, if you're looking for it, is Ilya Mikheyev, still playing on that top line, 7% rostered, a goal and 3 points over his last 5 games played. So obviously that's pretty solid for a guy who's just 7% rostered, playing on that top line with Elias Peterson as well. Elias Peterson looking as a guy who's scoring for sure, but definitely acting in more as a setup guy this year too. So as I mentioned, I'm just going to be sticking to one play at FanDuel Canada for this one, and I'm hammering the Hurricanes in this game. All right, we are looking on to Sunday now, and the first game we're going to be breaking down are the Washington Capitals versus the Chicago Blackhawks. I know, what an exhilarating game for you hockey fans out there. There's actually a decent amount of hockey games on Sunday, but trying to look at these games that I didn't mention on Saturday if a team is playing a back-to-back. So Capitals and Blackhawks, obviously the Chicago Blackhawks, one of the worst teams in the NHL, and they continue to show that. I know they had a huge 1-0 win against the Anaheim Ducks, but that was off an insane Peter Mrazek shutout, which continues to be the theme here. If they do win games, it's going to be off the back of a random Arvid Soderblom or Peter Mrazek masterclass game. So for the starts for Chicago, it's really Bedard or nothing. Beauvillier obviously acquired from the Vancouver Canucks for the Chicago Blackhawks just a couple weeks ago. He's 5% rostered, playing on that top line with Connor Bedard. Now, it's really too early to tell if this guy is going to be fantasy hockey relevant, but if you want to get really risky and start him, go for it. Washington still isn't that great. But if you're looking on the Washington side of things, Tom Wilson is, I talked about him in my must-add. Washington played 4 games this week, and this continues to be probably an elite matchup for Tom Wilson. 4 goals his last 5 games played, playing on that top line alongside Alexander Ovechkin and Dylan Strome. Really the 3 guys I'd only be starting on this Washington Capitals team, alongside John Carlson as well. And Sandin, started off the season pretty hot, but I think he's been a little bit more disappointing as of late. So some bets I'd be looking to place in this one, the under for sure. I don't think these 2 teams' offenses are great. The Capitals have been obviously a great team, but I think it's off the back of, if you look at Charlie Lindgren's numbers, absolutely absurd. If he's still available in your league, I think he's going to take over the net from Darcy Kemper here. So I do like the Caps in this one too to win it, but I think the under is the best bet. And honestly, another really good bet, Ovechkin, goalless his last 5 games played. He has 5 goals in his last 3 games played against Chicago and 15 goals over the course of his career. And granted, Washington being in the Eastern Conference has not played Chicago a ton of times. I think he's only played Chicago 23 times over the course of his career in the regular season. So 15 goals is a pretty solid number, but 5 goals his last 3 games played. One of those games he had a hat trick as well. So Ovechkin to score is my favorite bet in this game, alongside with the under, and then starting Tom Wilson is probably the best streamer for fantasy hockey players out there. And so another game on Sunday, the Winnipeg Jets taking on the Anaheim Ducks. Obviously, the Blackhawks, as I mentioned just before, had a 1-0 loss to the Chicago Blackhawks the other night on Thursday. So I think the Anaheim Ducks are actually a sneaky option in this one if you're looking for a sneaky underdog play on Sunday in the NHL. But looking at these two teams, I think Winnipeg is a little bit fraudulent looking at their analytics. You know, they're outside the top 15 in terms of shot attempt share per game. Expected goals for, they're 25th in the NHL. Expected goals against, they're 12th with it, which I think is really solid considering Rick Bowness took over this team that was a Winnipeg team that was really bad defensively under Paul Maurice. But the offense they're creating isn't great. Like the only 2 guys I'd rely on fantasy hockey wise is Mark Scheifele and Kyle Connor are the top ones. Ehlers has been rather inconsistent, but now in this top line, obviously he's going to get the residuals from those 2 other guys. And then obviously Josh Morrissey. Keep your eye on that second line now that Gabriel Velarde is back. It's almost like a younger line here with you got Velarde, Alex Iafallo, and then Cole Perfetti, who's kind of having his breakout year here, but just 2 points over his last 5 games played. For the Ducks, really, Frank Vatrano continues to be a guy you have to start in fantasy hockey. He's been awesome this year. Leo Carlsson as well, if he does play. I don't know what they're doing with him, but this guy continues to be pretty much a point per game when he is playing. So he needs to be in the lineup more often because they're a much better team when he is in the lineup. So I'd actually be looking at the Ducks money line or Ducks plus 1.5 in this one at FanDuel Canada if you are looking for a bet. All right, the last game we're going to be breaking down, the Minnesota Wild taking on the Seattle Kraken. Can't say this game is going to be too excited. I really like what John Hines has obviously done with this Minnesota Wild team, considering since he's kind of been taking over, just 1 loss since then and some impressive wins over that stretch as well since he's been the new head coach here. But Seattle has been playing a lot better recently, I think, in terms of getting pucks on net, shot attempt share. But if you look at their numbers for the whole season, they're still not great. You know, they're bottom 5 in Corsi percentage, bottom 2 in expected goals for, bottom 5 in expected goals against, and are creating little to no offense in terms of quality or high danger scoring chances too. So I think the Minnesota Wild are the best bet in this one, along with the under. And then for the Wild side of things, continue to start Matt Zuccarello. You know, this guy's an assist machine. Matt Boldy starting to find the back of the net. Kirill Kaprizov as well. Joel Eriksson, another guy I'd be starting. I'd probably stay away from Marco Rossi for right now. And then Philip Gustafsson. I talked about this in my buy low, sell high for goalies a couple weeks back. He's finally starting to play a lot better, starting to get some wins under his belt. Like even in their game against Vancouver on Thursday, they lost 2-0. They outshot Minnesota. Like Vancouver only had 17 shots in that game. I really don't think this Vancouver team is as impressive as people are talking about right now. So that's one thing to note there. But yeah, on the Kraken side of things, it's really tough to really start guys. Adam Larson is obviously a great start, especially if you're in bangers leagues. He's creating a decent amount of offense now, but really contributing in that hits and shots blocked categories as well. But on the offensive side of things, like Matty Beniers really hasn't been a guy you're going to want to start in fantasy hockey right now. Jared McCann is really the only forward I kind of be focusing. Oliver Bjorkstrand gets a lot of pucks on net, but doesn't really score a whole lot. So this Seattle game, I don't think will be very exciting. I'd rely on other games if you're trying to win your week, kind of a last minute hope or redemption here. I don't think this is the game you're going to be wanting to start, guys. I'd be looking at the 2 games I started before with the Jets and the Ducks, and then the Blackhawks and the Capitals. All right, guys, thank you for tuning in to the Fantasy Hockey Weekend Preview for Week 9. Let me know what you thought of these bets, starts, streamers, and everything else I kind of gave out in this video. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Download that FanDuel Canada app and get betting on the weekend in the NHL, and I'll see you guys next week for Must Add.